Hi, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I decided to take a couple days off, but I'm back again. We're going to continue reading in our story by The Shores of Silver Lake by Laura Ingalls Wilder. The West begins. Early the next morning, they were all in the wagon again. It had not been unloaded, so everything was ready to go. Nothing was left of the camp but Aunt Dorcas' shanty. Over the worn-out grass and dead spots where the shanties had been, surveyors were measuring and driving stakes for the new town that would be built. "We'll be along as soon as Hi gets his business settled," Aunt Dorcas said. "I'll see you at Silver Lake," Lena called to Laura, while Paul chirruped to the horses and the wheels began to turn. The sun shone brightly on the uncovered wagon, but the wind was cool and riding pleasant. Here and there men were working in the fields, and now and then a team and wagon passed. Soon the road curved downward through the rolling land, and Pa said, "The Big Sinks," I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, "river ahead." Laura began to see out loud for more. Laura began to see out loud for Mary. "The road's going down a low bank to the river, but there aren't any trees. There's just a big sky and grassy land and a little low creek. It's a big river sometimes, but now it's dried up till it's no bigger than Plum Creek. It trickles along from pond to pool by dry gravel stretches and cracked dry mud flats. Now the horses are stopping to drink." "Drink heartily," Pa said to the horses. "There's no more water for 30 miles. Beyond the low river, the grassy land was a low curve behind curve, and the road looked like a short hook. The road pushes through the grassy land and breaks off short, and that's the end of it," said Laura. "It can't be," Mary objected. "The road goes all the way to Silver Lake." "I know it does," Laura answered. "Well, then, I don't think you ought to say things like that," Mary said gently. "We should always be careful to say exactly what we mean." "I was saying what I meant," Laura protested, but she could not explain. There were so many ways of seeing things and so many ways of saying them. Beyond the Big Sinks, there was no more fields, houses, no people in sight. There really was no road, only a dim wagon trail and no railroad grade. Here and there Laura glimpsed a little wooden stake, almost hidden by the grasses. Pa said they were surveyor stakes for the railroad grade that was not started yet. Laura said to Mary, "This prairie is like an enormous meadow, stretching far away in every direction to the edge of the world." The endless waves of flowery grasses under the cloudless sky gave her a queer feeling. She could not say how she felt. All of them in the wagon and the team and even Pa seemed small. All morning Pa drove steadily along the dim wagon trail and nothing changed. The farther they went to the west, the smaller they seemed, and the less they seemed to be going anywhere. The wind blew the grass always with the same rippling endlessly. The horses' feet in the wheels going over the grass made always the same sound. The jiggling of the board seat was always the same jiggling. Laura thought they might go on forever, yet always be in the same changeless place that would never even know that they were there. Only the sun moved. Without ever seeming to, the sun moved steadily upward in the sky. When it was overhead, that would be like noon, they stopped to feed the horses and eat a picnic lunch on the grass. That's something that you can always look. And when you see the sun straight up, it's usually noon. It was good to rest on the ground after riding all morning. Laura thought of the many times they had eaten under the sky while they were traveling all the way from Wisconsin to Indian Territory and back to Minnesota. Now they were in the Dakota Territory going farther west. But this was different from all the other times, not only because there was no cover on the wagon, no beds on it, but for some other reason Laura couldn't say how. This prairie was different. Pa, she asked, when you find the homestead, will it be like the one we had in Indian Territory? Pa thought before he answered. No, he said finally, this is different country. I can't tell you how exactly, but this prairie is different, feels different. That's likely enough, Ma said sensibly. We're west of Minnesota and north of Indian Territory, so naturally the flowers and the grasses are not the same. But that's not what Pa and Laura meant. There really was almost no difference in the flowers and grasses. There was something else here that was not anywhere else. It's getting cold. It was an enormous stillness that made you feel still. And when you were still, you could feel great stillness coming closer. All the little sounds of the blowing grasses and the horses munching and whooshing in their feed box in the back of the wagon, and even the sounds of eating and talking could not touch the enormous silence on this prairie. Pa talked about his new job. He would be a company storekeeper and the timekeeper at Silver Lake Camp. He would run the store and he would keep straight in his books the charge each account every man on the job and know exactly how much money was due each man for his work. After his board bill, boarding's, your housing, and his account at the store had been subtracted. And when the paymaster brought the money each payday, Pa would pay each man. That was all he had to do, and for that he would be paid $50 a month. And best of all, Carolyn, we're among the very first out here, said Pa. We've got the pick of land for our homestead. By George, our luck's turned at last. At first, the new land and $50 a month for a whole summer to boot. It's wonderful, Charles, said Ma. But all their talking did not mean anything to the enormous silence in that prairie. After that afternoon, they went on, mile after mile, never seeing a house or any sign of people, never seeing anything but grass and sky. The trail they followed was marked only by bent and broken grasses. Laura saw old Indian trails and buffalo paths worn deep in the ground and now grassed over. She saw strange large depressions, straight-sided and flat-bottomed, that had been buffalo wallows, where now the grass was growing. Laura had never seen a buffalo, and Pa said it was not likely she would ever see one. Only a little while before, the vast herds of thousands of buffaloes had grazed over this country. They had been the Indians' cattle, and white men had slaughtered them. On every side of the prairie now stretched away empty to far, clear skyline. The wind never stopped blowing, waving of the tall grass that had turned brown in the sun. All afternoon, while Pa kept driving onward, he would merrily whistle or sing. The song he sang oftenest was, "Oh, come to this country and don't feel alarmed, for Uncle Sam is rich enough to give us all a farm. And even baby Carrie joined in the chorus, though she did not bother to follow the tune. Oh, come away, come away, come away, I say. Oh, come away, come right away. Oh, come to this country and have no fear of harm. Our Uncle Sam is rich enough to give us all a farm. The sun was lowering in the west when the rider appeared on the prairie behind the wagon. He came following behind, not very fast, but coming a little nearer, mile after mile, while the sun was sinking. Now I want to show you what it looked like at least part of the time. How much farther is it to Silver Lake, Charles? Ma asked. About 10 miles, said Pa. There isn't anybody living nearer, is there? No, said Pa. Ma did not say anything more. Neither did anyone else. They kept glancing back at that rider behind them, and each time they looked, he was a little nearer. He was surely following them and not meaning to overtake them until the sun sank. The sun was so low that every hollow between the prairie swells was filled with shadow. Each time the Pa glanced back, his hand made a little motion, slapping the horses with the lines to hurry them. But no team could pull a loaded wagon as fast as a man could ride. The man was so near now that Laura could see 2 pistols in leather holsters on his hips. His hat was pulled low over his eyes. A red bandana was tied loosely around his neck. Pa had brought his gun west, but it was not in the wagon now. Laura wondered where it was, but she did not ask Pa. Pa looked back again and saw another rider coming on a white horse. He wore a red shirt. He and the white horse were far behind and small, but they came fast, galloping. They overtook the first rider, and the 2 came on together. Ma said in a low voice, "There's 2 of them now, Charles." Mary was frightened. "What is it, Laura? What's the matter?" Pa looked back quickly. Then he was comfortable. "Everything's all right now," he said. "That's Big Jerry." "Who's Big Jerry?" Ma asked. "He's half French and half Indian," Pa answered carelessly. "A gambler, and some say a horse thief, but a darn good fellow. Big Jerry won't let anybody waylay us." Ma looked at him astonished. Her mouth opened and then shut. She did not say anything. The riders came up beside the wagon. Pa lifted his hand and said, "Hello, Jerry." "Hello, Ingles," Big Jerry answered. The other man gave them all a snarling look and went galloping on ahead, but Big Jerry rode along the wagon. He looked like an Indian. He was tall and big, not one bit fat, and his thin face was brown. His shirt was flaming red. His straight black hair swung against his flat, high-boned cheek as he rode. He wore no hat, and his snow-white horse wore no saddle or bridle. The horse was free. He could go where he wanted to go, but he wanted to go with Big Jerry wherever Big Jerry wanted to ride. The horse and the man moved together as if they were one animal. They were beside the wagon only a moment. Then away they went in the smoothest, prettiest run, down into a little hollow and up away, straight into the blazing round sun, on the far edge of the west. That's where the sun sets, is on the west, rises in the east. The flaming red shirt and the white horse vanished in the blazing golden light. Laura let out a breath. Oh, Mary, the snow-white horse and the tall brown man with such a black head and a bright red shirt, the brown prairie all around, and they rode right into the sun as it was going down. They'll go on in the sun around the world. Mary thought a moment. Then she said, Laura, you know he couldn't ride into the sun. He's just riding along the ground like anyone else. But Laura did not feel she told a lie. What she'd said was true. Somehow that moment when the beautiful free pony and the wild man rode into the sun would last forever. Ma feared that the other man might be lying wait to rob them, but Pa told her, don't worry. Big Jerry's gone ahead to find him and will stay with him till we get to camp. Jerry'll see that no one molests us. Ma looked back to see that the girls were all right. She held Grace snugly on her lap. She did not say anything because nothing she could say would make any difference. But Laura knew that Ma never wanted to leave Plum Creek and did not like to be here now. She did not like traveling in that lonely country with night coming and such men riding on the prairie. The wild calls of birds came down from the fading sky. More and more dark lines streaked the pale blue air overhead. Straight lines of wild ducks and long flying wedges of geese. The leaders called to their flocks behind them, and each bird answered in their turn. The whole sky twanged. Honk, 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 quack, quack, quack. They were flying low, said Pa, settling down for the night on the lakes. There were lakes ahead. A thin silvery line at the very edge of the sky was Silver Lake, and a little glimmers south of it were Twin Lakes, Henry and Thompson. A wee dark blob between them was the Lone Tree. Pa said it was a big cottonwood, the only tree to be seen between the Big Sinks River and the gym. It grew out of a little rise of the ground no wider than a road between the Twin Lakes, and it grew big because its roots could reach the water. We'll get some seeds from it to plant on our homestead, Pa said. You can't see Spirit Lake from here. It's 9 miles northwest of Silver Lake. You see, Carolyn, what fine hunting country this is. Plenty of good water and good feeding ground for the wild fowl, which is another word for birds. Yes, Charles, I see, said Ma. The sun sank, a ball of pulsing liquid light. It sank in the clouds of crimson and silver. Crimson is another name for red. Cold purple shadows rose in the east and crept slowly across the prairie, then rose in heights, on heights of darkness from which the stars swung low and bright. The wind, which all day long had blown strongly, dropped low with the sun and went whispering along the tall grasses. The earth seemed to lie breathing softly under the summer night. Pa drove on and on beneath the low stars. The horse's feet went softly thumping on the grassy ground. Far, far ahead, a few tiny lights pricked through the dark. They were the lights of Silver Lake Camp. Don't need to see the trail for the next 8 miles, Pa told Ma. All a man's got to do is keep driving towards the lights. There's nothing between us and camp but smooth prairie and air. Laura was tired and chilled. The lights were far away. They might be stars after all. The whole night was glittering with stars. Close overhead and down all the sides, great stars glittered in patterns on the dark. Tall grass rustled against the turning wheels, kept on rustling against the wheels that kept on turning. Suddenly, Laura's eyes jerked open. There was an open doorway and light streaming out, and in the dazzle of lamplight, Uncle Henry was coming, laughing. So this must be Uncle Henry's house in the big woods when Laura was little. So that's the Uncle Henry. For that was where Uncle Henry was. Henry, Ma exclaimed. It's a surprise, Carolyn, Pa sang out. I thought I wouldn't tell you Henry was out here. I declare it takes my breath away. I'm so surprised, said Ma. And then the big man was laughing up at them, and he was a different one, Cousin Charlie. He was the big boy who had bothered Uncle Henry and Pa out in the oak field and been stung by thousands of yellow jackets. Hello, Half Pint. Hello, Mary. And here's baby Carrie, a big girl now. Not a baby any longer, huh? Cousin Charlie helped them down from the wagon, while Uncle Henry took Grace and Pa helped Ma over the wheel. And here came Cousin Louisa, bustling and talking and herding them all into the shanty. Cousin Louisa and Charlie were both grown up now. They were keeping the boarding shanty, cooking for the men who were working on the grade, but the men had eaten long ago, and now they were all sleeping in the bunkhouses. Cousin Louisa talked about all this while she dished up their supper she had been keeping hot on the stove. After supper, Uncle Henry lighted a lantern and led the way to the shanty the men had built for Pa. It's all new lumber, Carolyn, fresh and clean. Clean as a whistle, Uncle Henry said, holding up the lantern so they could see the new board walls and the bunk up against them. There was a bunk on one side for Pa and Ma, and on the other side 2 narrow bunks, one above the other, for Mary and Laura and Carrie and Grace. The beds were already spread in the bunks. Cousin Louisa had seen to that. In no time at all, Laura and Mary were cuddled in the rustling, fresh hay mattress, with the sheets and quilts drawn up to their noses, and Pa blew out the lantern. That had been a long day of traveling, but what a nice surprise to find more family. Family that you did not know you were ever going to get to see again. I have some family, quite a bit of family, that live a long way from me that I think I will never get to see here on earth again, but maybe one day in heaven. Well, let's see what happens tomorrow. All right. I want to pray blessings on you and yours, in your house and out of your house, in the day and in the night. Whatever you do, keep dreaming. Good night.